class. Welcome to week 1 of History 104 with me, Dr. D'Amico, your professor. Week 1 is all about the Gilded Age, and I'm going to talk to you in just a minute about what that is, what that means. But I thought you might like to look at this political cartoon here from the Gilded Age. I think it might seem kind of familiar even to those of us living, in today's age, right? Here's this poor working man, and he's really getting smushed between, on the one hand, low wages, and on the other hand, high rent. So you can see that the person doing the smushing in this version, one classic way to tell someone is rich and maybe kind of a jerk in a political cartoon is if they're kind of fat and they're wearing some sort of top hat. This is Pullman, and this is referring to Pullman train cars. But in any case, regardless of whether or not you know who Pullman was, I think that this cartoon probably still makes a lot of sense. That's kind of fun. So, the Gilded Age. Don't forget to watch this video. You're watching the video. Good job. So here's what we're going to do in this video. I have a really quick review for you. And what I'm going to do is look ahead to week 1, a little bit into week 2. And what I really want to do in just a second here is show you the Essay 1 assignment. Because if you keep the Essay 1 assignment in mind as you work on the assignments for weeks 1 and 2, I think it'll help you write the essay. So, just to briefly let you know about week 1, you have your introductory assignments due this week. Then you have 3 week 1 assignments, a discussion board posting and a follow-up post, reading outline 1, and journal 1. So what I'm going to just do right now is go over to the Canvas page to show you that, and then I'll also show you that essay 1. So here is our Canvas page. So I was at the course homepage, then I clicked content, and that brought me here to this page. Here are the introductory activities, which I briefly mentioned in my previous video, and I hope you're working on those. So these first 3 activities due pretty early in week 1, so make sure you're on that. Then here's week 1, the Gilded Age, and you have reading outlines, a discussion board posting and responses due, and journal 1 due. So I'll just click over into the reading outlines. There are some terms I want you to look up and define. Then you are to read chapter 11 of Howard Zinn's book, A People's History of the United States, available at this link, and answer these questions. So that's due. Also due is journal 1. And I again just want to point out to you that journal 1 has additional readings in it. So you will need to do these other readings and follow these instructions. So that's a little bit about what's due in week 1. What I also just want to touch on right now is essay 1. Now, essay 1 is not due for another, I don't know when you're watching this video, but it's not due for till about 2.5 weeks into the course. But what I want you to see right now is the essay question, because looking at this now, you can sort of start thinking about it as you do the work for weeks 1 and 2. And the essay question is, I want you to think about what you've read and learned about in weeks 1 and 2. Identify 2 or 3 of the challenges in the quickly changing world of the late 19th and early 20th century. And I want you to think for yourselves. Remember, I'm all about you thinking for yourself. How are these challenges and their proposed solutions still relevant to today's world? I gave you some ideas to think about. You don't have to use these, but you're welcome to. So that's just some stuff to start thinking about. I really encourage you to look at this essay question before you, as you, I guess, get into weeks 1 and 2. So, okay, we did that. And now what we're going to do is I'm going to just remind you of a couple things, and then I'm going to start on building a timeline for you of this whole class, U.S. History 1877 to the present. Then I'm going to briefly talk about the Gilded Age, which is the week 1 sort of material that you'll be reading about and learning about. So just to remind you, some things I said in my last video. Number 1, I am a human professor. There I am. I want you to succeed in this class. Do not hesitate to contact me. You can email me. You can message me on Canvas. Please don't hesitate to reach out. I want to remind you that I want you to work smart, focusing on concepts, not details. I want you to think for yourself, as the Beatles tell us to do. A song written by George Harrison. So interesting. Anyway, make sure that you know / remember that you can always refer on Canvas to our course map for all sorts of details, including due dates. Make sure you understand that every week we have these assignments due, and then we have the 3 essays also due in the class, which are worth a fair amount of points. So that's something you want to make sure you get in. Okay. I already talked about thinking about the assignment question and thinking about for essay 1, and I talked about making sure you hand in these assignments for week 1. So that initial discussion board posting is due Thursday, then you will have follow-up postings to your classmates due Sundays, and those instructions are up on the discussion board assignment. Then make sure you get your reading outline and your journal in as well. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is just briefly walk you through a little bit of starting a timeline to help you in your head understand when we are, where we are every week. So this class is U.S. History 1877 to the present. And so I tried to stop myself from putting anything in before 1877, but just to give you a brief context, I put 2 bullet points. Number 1, I'm sure you've heard of the Declaration of Independence, the 4th of July. That's when the United States declared its independence from England. I'm sure you know that's July 4th, 1776. And then the other pre-1877 event I want to call to your attention was the Civil War, which was from 1861 to 1865. That's the North versus the South. The North won the Civil War, as you probably know. And then the federal government stayed in the South for a little more than a decade after the Civil War during the so-called period of Reconstruction. So that's sort of what we consider a big dividing point in U.S. history. There's sort of pre-Civil War, pre-Reconstruction, and then post. So that's why our class begins and ends in 1877. And that's a really common starting and stopping place for U.S. history classes. So if you're taking this class and you end up transferring to another college, for example, this class should transfer as a history credit. Okay, so anyway, our class begins and we're in week 1 right now. The Gilded Age, 1877 to about 1900-ish is when we say the Gilded Age happened. So what is the Gilded Age? Well, let's look. So the Gilded Age, 1870s to about 1900. This is the term itself was coined by Mark Twain, the super famous author. He had so many clever things that he said, and one of them was that he called the era that he was living in the Gilded Age. And gilded is sort of an old-fashioned term that means like when something is covered with, like when a piece of jewelry that's made of a cheaper metal is covered with a really thin layer of gold to make it seem like it's made out of gold. And so sort of the metaphor that Twain was sort of drawing on, talking about was that everything looked really nice during the Gilded Age. There were a lot of like really wealthy people, for example. And actually people were really fond of covering everything in gold in the Gilded Age as well, literally. But underneath that, was a sort of seething underbelly of poverty and discontent. So, and here, maybe you've been wondering about this other amazing political cartoon. The Gilded Age has some of the best political cartoons in American history. And here's one where there's a big octopus. You can see this octopus has its tentacles wrapped around, government in Washington, D.C., wrapped around sort of just all over the United States. This octopus is Standard Oil, which was the big oil company of the late 1800s. And it was quite often referred to as an octopus because it sort of spread out and bought up all of the other oil companies, bought up different parts of the oil industry. So they had really a huge monopoly. So this was obviously a political cartoon talking about the political influence of Standard Oil. And just a really cool octopus, but definitely a menacing octopus. So definitely a cartoon expressing some concern. So that brings me to one of the ways that I like to think about the Gilded Age is an era of quote unquote more money, but also more problems. So the late 19th century saw in the US and really all over the world an unprecedented consolidation of capital. This is an era of high industrialism, more and more people changing from working maybe in a farm, a shop, living in the country, to moving to the city, working in a factory, for example. We see all sorts of new ways of working, living, and organizing our money and goods. And so one question to just think to yourself about as I go on and talk about the journal assignment is some people say that we today are living in a new Gilded Age. So maybe some of this stuff will feel kind of familiar to you. It's just something for you to consider, and you could even write about it in your essay 1 if you like. Are we living in a new Gilded Age? So your journal reading for this week, you have 2 readings, one from Andrew Carnegie and one from Henry Demarest Lloyd. And they're sort of reflect 2 opposite perspectives about the Gilded Age. You'll see Andrew Carnegie, who you've probably heard of him. If you're from Western Pennsylvania, I'm just going to assume you've heard of him because he was a Pittsburgh guy. He's going to talk about the gospel of wealth. And he's going to argue, he says there is a problem of the rich and poor. And he basically is going to say the only solution is for rich people to act as trustees for the poor, to take all of that wealth that they've been able to accumulate because of the Gilded Age, because of all these changes, and administer it for the community. So, hey, poor people, just let us rich people just trust us to administer the wealth for the community. And I will say Andrew Carnegie himself did walk that walk. There are Carnegie libraries all over the United States of America, and there are so many ways in which even to this day his legacy of philanthropy lives on. However, on the other hand, we have a lot of other voices from the Gilded Age saying, we can't just trust a few rich people to run things for the good of everybody else. So you'll see that Lloyd, in the other document you're going to read, is going to say that we, people, are not good enough or wise enough to be trusted with this power of ruining ourselves in the attempt to ruin others. Free competition could be let run only in a community where everyone had learned to say and act, I am the state. And what he means is only in a situation where every single person was thinking about the common good could truly free competition really lead to good. So I'll let you read their words, but I want you to understand that they have 2 different perspectives about what to do with this rapidly changing world in which they found themselves. Okay, don't forget to contact me if you have any questions at all.